can record, but I also want to say real quick. You said I remember I said my pen name Joseph Anthony, and then I immediately hear Gus chuckling about like it's not a big deal. It's just better. I'd rather say Joseph Anthony than quaterniomics or
Joe, or just Joe?
no, because it's like I'm trying to make like an aesthetic. My whole life is like I'm trying to be a super villain or like a superhero or something. So I want to be like Joseph Anthony. I know that's like autistic or whatever, but it one day it's gonna fall into place and it's gonna be really nice, hopefully. But whether that's on record or not, let me know and we can begin if you want.
Let's do it.
Okay. Hello, it's Joseph Anthony.
Okay, so you guys were getting to the beef of
Yeah,
the
let's
thing.
let's get to the bottom of this.
Okay, so Gus, I just want to let's just set a working definition. So I use Google's. Hedonism is defined as the pursuit of pleasure or sensual self-indulgence. And then what I sometimes equate too much hedonism to is the optimization of that definition. So do we agree on that or no?
Yes.
Okay, so then I would just follow by saying like what I said previously in the Discord channel that too much hedonism hinders STEM optimization or trying to, be the best engineer, be the best mathematician, what have you. These activities hinder it. Of course, lots of things hinder it, but hedonism is a big category that can, an overarching category that can kind of like build a good heuristic for to try to, live against these hedonistic tendencies, I guess you could say. Sorry for the long-windedness.
No, that's fine. That's perfect actually, because I'm still thinking. I literally
You're
had the
just
response and then I forgot.
your
Um,
description just seems really vague, like for now, because hedonism, wait, I understood to be something a lot more specific, which is ethical theory that pleasure is the highest good and proper aim of human life.
Yeah, I mean, I said this to another person in this Discord. I won't say their name, but I basically said like, what's going to be our operating working definition? That notion, which is like very academic ivory tower philosophical notion, or the day-to-day thing that people experience every single day that actually, gets to us. Now, I have an just to support you for a second. I have a guy, a professor of linguistics, who really talks about that definition you're talking about in regards to like some Greek and Roman concepts as well. But I just think it's really lofty compared to my definition.
It's just that this definition I take issue with. Your definition just seems to be something that may or may not be the state of affairs. Like take enjoying a meal, for example. Like I might really enjoy it if I'm focused on it, or not as much if I'm distracted.
Yeah, so I
And
mean, we would agree that's hedonism, right?
yes.
sure, but is that a useful definition and that just makes the distinction that we're kind of going for?
So what I think is my disagreement is that you're saying the optimization of pleasure, basically,
So eating
optimizing for
a meal,
that.
so eating a meal is not the too much hedonism. That's actually a great amount of hedonism in normal day-to-day life is a good meal. But if
So
you're eating like 10 meals a day, then that's too much hedonism.
yeah, but you get to a point where you could argue that you're being a bad hedonist because you're gonna feel like shit after you do that. So what I would say is like, yes, I agree. I agree with you actually that the optimization of hedonism is bad for STEM pursuits. But I think that's within the current parameters of being flesh and bone human beings. And I don't think that Andres is because what would that mean, right? In the current context, if you really wanted to optimize for hedonism, even though you would probably be being a worse hedonist overall over time, you would just like take heroin or something. You would inject heroin. That would be like the most blissful experience for however long heroin lasts, right?
Yeah,
Supposedly.
that's my kind of like that's my kind of like argument against him, but it's just like a kind of a tongue-in-cheek argument. I'm like, well, what's wireheading? And then they always refer to me to that article, which I haven't yet read. So maybe we can talk about it. Wireheading done right.
You could
But
say that. You could even say that it's not realistic given the current technological constraints. But that's something that's going to change. I believe it's going to change soon. We already have the Neuralink coming out at some point. We already know that magnetic stimulation of certain parts of the brain like can do that. But yes, I agree that like at least in animal models that ends up having a really bad effect, namely that they just starve to death because they just press the lever to have the part of their brain stimulated since it's not subject to tolerance like it would be with chemicals with neurotransmitters.
and just to just clarify real quick, because you're bringing up the like the tech side, all that neural lace and even bioelectronics and magnetic stimulation, those are going to be for getting people out of a minima first.
Right, but at first, but you can't. I'm sure we can agree that at some point it's going to be used to enhance the lives of the people that are at baseline.
It, I mean, like what I guess what I'm saying is like with considering that as a time scale, like it might be too far to
I,
tell whether we'll
well, then
get
I
to.
think you're more pessimistic than I am about technological development, or I'm just hopelessly optimistic. But this is immaterial to our disagreement, though. This is a factual. I'm trying to get to the value disagreement here, and I feel like the value disagreement ultimately depends on the factual, on the descriptive. Namely, what is the relationship between productivity as a function of hedonic tone? And I would agree with you that yeah, if you're analyzing just moment to moment experience, right, the most pleasurable experience in the moment is probably not going to be the most productive, right, from a STEM perspective. Like if I took 300 micrograms of although that could be really bad. So you have the tail effects there, right? Wow, I can't speak. Productivity goes really low at really high valence states and really low at really low valence states. But that's besides the point.
Can I just pause you there for a second?
Go ahead.
Can you explain what you mean with the productivity
Well, I'm talking about like
bifurcation?
in a sense that Joe could probably explain what he means because I'm using his definition of STEM, his utility function.
So yeah, I mean, we've been you together, and I don't think I disagree. We've been conflating the term productivity with STEM optimization.
Well, I think those are productivity is a broader term, but I'm using it to mean specifically productivity within STEM, whether that's learning the material or actually like researching or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and so this brings up a good point because STEM optimization and hedonism, both of these two categories, there's a lot to unpack within each of them, whether it be learning or executing in STEM optimization, or a total like a certain hedonic tone baseline in hedonism versus being geeked out of your mind while clearly if you're just from I know I mentioned I don't necessarily think anecdotal experiences are good measures, but maybe that's not the right word, but just entertain me for a second. But like, if you're geeked out on whatever while you're, coding, for example, you'd probably be better off sober minded. That's part of my argument.
So why did Paul Erdős take amphetamines? Why do so many coders take amphetamines? I'm not saying they're geeked out. You're right. I'm conflating them, but
Hold on a minute. Does anyone here think that the streamer called Destiny is anywhere near Enlightenment?
no,
Just
not at
just food
all.
for thought.
Not at all.
Uh,
I like some of his takes, and he's actually probably one of the more balanced people out there in the political sphere.
Sure,
But
but
he's
the
definitely
point
not
is that
enlightened.
he's on. I mean, I don't know the guy, but like drugs
Have you watched his stuff?
for performance enhancement, it's just there's a certain like speed of talking that I'm not, it just sort of seems that way. But one of my point is that that's what drugs can give you. They can't make you more what you actually want to be, which is the like Buddha-esque.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that. We're not optimizing for the serotonergic contentment of enlightenment. We're optimizing for being able to produce knowledge in STEM in particular.
But you're thinking that being enlightened has nothing to do with being able to make STEM knowledge.
I treat them, because I don't have any evidence for a strong correlation or anti-correlation. I just treat them as orthogonal, as like independent completely. I
Just to
don't know.
just to pull from someone else's anecdote, I'm not going to say his name because I don't know if he wants to be mentioned or not. But that one guy who I'm sure you all know mentioned that after Jhana 1, you cannot perform problem solving properly, which, I don't care personally because I'm not trying to attain Jhana 2, but that's just my personal journey.
What the fuck? I'm not gonna say
I'm
it.
sure that's true. I'm sure that's true. Like if you're in a state of absorption, which are the jhanas, you're probably not. You can't, because if you're thinking about other things, you're not going to be in jhana. Jhana requires a level of absorption that excludes the kind of problem solving that you would need for STEM. But my point is that um, it only hinders your STEM progress insofar as it takes time away from you doing STEM things, and that to me is pretty. It's not a very trivially. It's a trivially true statement, because
Okay.
anything that isn't STEM is taking away time from STEM. But there's no reason for you. You're not going to do. You're not going to study 12 hours a day. Maybe you will, but chances
Okay.
are you won't.
So yeah, that's true, and that's something we can get into with like deep work and how much productivity you actually get done in a day. Which me personally, I don't get much as much as I'd like to think as of right now. But another good thought experiment question to ask ourselves is: do you want to be a human living the good life, whatever that means to you? The relative good life, or do you want to be an instrument for STEM or an instrument for empiricism? And that's a major question I asked myself, and I decided on the latter. Even though I can't show anything for it right now, even though, me personally, I'm not there yet, that question was critical for me. And that is why the crux of the argument is like why I'm against too much hedonism, or hedonism as defined by the optimization of pursuit of pleasure, blah, blah, blah.
So what I would say to that is I hope that that's an inclusive or, because my answer to that would be I want to do both.
Yeah, that's okay. That's understandable, and I think it is. But it's like this model could be seen as like a balancing act. Like, so going back, like the good life may STEM optimization may weigh you down, or okay, I don't know how to word. I'm not good with
I think that's
physics.
part of. I'll be honest, that's part of it though. It's like, for me, depending on what your utility function, living the good life would be pursuing STEM, because that's part of your utility function. So that's why I feel like it's a false dilemma, because depending on, if we were I hate using the term normies, but if we were people not interested in STEM, then this wouldn't even be a question, right? We would pick living a good life.
Yeah.
But there's something about the sacrifice that you have to make that ends up being more than that ends up being better than not making the sacrifice.
Yeah, and then that goes into another parameter that is unpacked from these two categories, which is meaning and purpose, and where do you derive those things from? And for us, it's probably, for you, mathematics, and for me, like some type of cybernetic or some type of thing. I'm not sure yet, to be honest with you, but at least we're oriented in that direction, which is a good start.
I feel like it's not about having one purpose, it's about having several. And you can have a larger purpose for which all the other purposes are working under it, you know? Like they're just extensions of this more fundamental purpose, and that can be STEM, that's fine. But I feel like treating life as one dimensional, as having this one purpose, is very. I'm making a hedonic argument, but I feel like my hedonic argument, if you live a more full life, if you're more balanced, you're probably going to do better in the things that you want to do well in. That's my point. Because burnout is a real thing. So that's an example of where, if you were to take this to its logical consequence of optimizing to the maximum that you could, right? You would probably do much worse than if you tried striking a balance between that pursuit and other pursuits.
Right, but the okay, so yeah, and that harkens back to the book Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned, which I talked about last time about open-endedness. But I don't think you can exist in a state where the hedonism optimizer and the STEM optimizer are running at the same time.
I don't think that what I'm doing is
Yeah,
hedonist
I did
optimizing
it,
though.
but you need a third thing that you're actually optimizing for?
For the well-being of sentient life. There you go. Well, that includes you and other people, and that's kind of what what QRI is after. Like, you don't think that what he's doing on like, well, I mean, I don't know how deep his research on it was, but like cluster headaches and psychedelics as a potential treatment for that. You don't think that that's like an instrumental thing?
I think it's good. I mean, I wouldn't be interested. I found Andres before I even knew about the Twitter presence of Teapot and whatever. I found him on YouTube and I subscribed because it was interesting. But at the same time, like, I don't know. I did watch that TED talk recently. I did have a criticism of it, but it
I haven't
escaped.
watched it.
Yeah, it's just like yeah, these are great ideas, but I'm trying to think bigger. I
But
know that's
but my point is like, what's the point of having like all this cool tech if we're not living life better? Like, I feel like there has to be. I think naturally our well-being is going to match the technology that we have to modify our own neurology. It'll just have to. And like, what you're trying to do is you're focusing on like the bad side of the pleasure scale, which makes complete sense, especially if you're leaning more towards like a negative utilitarian bent where minimizing suffering and increasing pleasure are inherently asymmetric. And I agree, they are asymmetric.
I don't know why you would say that. Wouldn't they
Yeah.
be dependently arising?
No, because I think that like, let's say that someone is starving, right? Would it be like better to give that same amount of food? Like, if you did a utilitarian calculus, right? Could you give that food in some amount to someone who's already not starving that it would make up for it?
I'm
That
not
would be
sure
the
I'm
same thing.
following the logic
Like,
here.
I'm trying to think of a better example. I'm not explaining this well.
We're going for a global harm minimizing model, which is
Yeah,
maximizing removal of the hindrances.
sure, but I still feel like that is working under some utility function that I'm not entirely sure is aligned with Joe's utility function. Because you could say that some hindrances in those models of Eastern traditions are actually useful in Joe's model of his utility function.
Yeah,
Like
he could also
dissatisfaction, right?
optimize for neutralizing the hindrances.
Like
Anyone could.
dissatisfaction. Do you think that would be useful? Do you think that's useful for STEM optimization, Joe?
okay. I just need clarity. What do you mean by neutralize the hindrances? You mean like minimize the hindrances?
Well, it's more like cutting a rope that is tied around something, and then it expands. That's what hindrance sort of physically is like. Um, well,
Can you
I'm
repeat?
hearing
Sorry,
myself coming through the
repeat
audio.
what you, can you repeat what you said after? It's like tying a rope or cutting a rope.
Okay, so the only reason I said hindrances is because Gus knows something about Buddhism, okay? I don't even know what the hindrances are, and I gotta look it up.
I mean, there's a specific list of it, but I feel like the context in which they're used is, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to be in the context specifically of.
I'm just trying to
Although
give you
I
an
was
idea of
reading
my
a
utility
secondary source.
function. I'm trying to give you my utility function is for removing the hindrances or hindrance-like
Right, but that's a
thing.
Joe. That's a Joe may or may not be useful because he's working under possibly another utility function. Whether they're aligned or not is precisely the question. I think that it can be aligned because I feel like if you remove the hindrances, then there's more space for you to like do what you want to do. I feel like unless you turn into one of those people that after like they get stream entry or whatever, that's all they talk about.
Uh, you remember the scene? I don't know if you ever saw this movie, Rescuers Down Under.
I haven't, but let me look that up. Rescuers Down Under, you said?
It's a Disney
The rescue.
movie. Yeah,
Oh,
and just imagine like, I mean, we haven't seen it, damn it. So maybe I think the scene I'm thinking of is right at the beginning of the movie. So if you're not big on cartoons, you can just
no, I just haven't seen that one. That's kind of surprising though. that I haven't because it's Disney. Actually,
Anyway,
I
yeah,
feel like
so
I
it
have, but
worked
that was like
really
when
good.
I was a fucking kid, so I don't remember. But yeah, what's the? You can use the analogy. Go ahead.
I feel it works really good. And one of the scenes in the movie, they free a bird that is in a trap and flies away, and it sort of reminds me of like what the hindrances are like when you lose them.
Yeah, you're free. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a good point. So would you rather free a single bird at the at the at the cost of more time and also freeing a million birds? You know, so like that's the difference between not Andres and I, but maybe like these more direct utilitarian approaches to hedonism and balance between hedonism between optimization of like I don't know if it's related to STEM. Yeah, it's related to STEM in the sense that you have to devise some mechanism to free multiple birds. Sorry if I dirtied the waters of the conversation, but I think it's an important point. Like, you could help with these anti-tolerance drugs, but I think a large scale or any type of whatever for cluster headaches, and then a larger scale thing would be working on like the chemical and electrical engineering needed for neural lace, which would like Gus was saying, would help people on a much larger scale, or with optimizing for the good life or what have you, whatever they want to do.
So I would say again, like freeing the one bird, namely yourself, versus freeing multiple other birds, isn't an exclusive situation. They're not mutually exclusive. So I would say why not both? And I feel like that we can't not go into specifics here. Like at least make the distinctions between the different kinds of hedonic, the more explicitly hedonic related activities. Because you mentioned anti-tolerance drugs, right? Okay, we're talking about pharmacology now. I think that I'm much closer to your position as far as like reckless use of substances, you know. But I think that there's still like a way that you could, depending on the person, you could still use them in a way that uh, doesn't affect your motivation or intellectual ability. At least some of them. Like, can I tell you my? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
No, so like I feel like we're both arguing here from partially anecdotal personal experience.
uh
Um,
yeah, definitely.
I don't want to say that like drugs are the reason I did well, but I certainly was doing the best academically, like arguably in my entire life, in a period where I was like experimenting pretty heavily with substances. So
And
I
I have
I don't
complete opposite
right.
experience.
So you see how like that's why we're talking past each other probably because your experience is of the exact opposite.
Yeah, but just like again with a day-to-day example, like if you see people with day-to-day hedonism as opposed to the philosophical notion of good life optimizer or whatever, you see people who more often or not the happier they are and this is really reaching, but it seems like the happier and better they're living their best life, so to speak, they are, the further removed they are from STEM optimization or STEM in general.
Right,
It's
but that's not us though, or at least that's not me.
That speaks on the fact that I would argue the three of us are neurodivergent, which gives you the opportunity to explore different thoughts and stuff like that, ideas.
I always thought it was completely normal.
You basically just called us a bunch of weirdos, but it's okay.
Yeah, but I
I
also
kind of
called myself a weirdo, so
it's okay to insult others if you include yourself. I love that rule.
I think we agree. I think it's just
It's just a matter of emphasis, honestly. That's the only way I can put it. It just seems like we're emphasizing different things, and I still feel like I'm emphasizing like STEM optimization, but it's just that there's been a significant overlap between the non-STEM and the STEM, in my opinion.
okay. And I would just say I guess another thing is like I'd be lying to you guys if I said I hadn't thought about have these visualizations in my head of wearing really nice clothes and going out to nice dinners with lots of people, or having a what, I don't know how to say this without sounding crass, but like a trophy girlfriend or something like that. But these all these thoughts, even the thoughts themselves are hindering me because I could be thinking about STEM optimization. I know that sounds so funny,
Okay,
but
okay. Wait, hold up. Let me make a joke. Okay, Mr. Bitches, we get it.
no, I don't get no bitches. And that's why I think those
Nah,
thoughts.
but
So
here's the thing. I just don't feel like you can't. I don't feel like you can't do all the above.
it's
And
in
I think you're doing worse by like
order to
depriving
make.
yourself from that.
Okay, it's not that I'm depriving myself from getting that. It's that those kind of things take work to get in the same way getting a Q1 publication in Nature or Cell
That's
would take
fair.
a lot of work. And I forget
I
what else
agree.
to say, but yeah, that's pretty much is the gist of it. So if we agree, then so basically, okay, so I'm not going to quiz you, but I think I guess I'll say like I don't I wouldn't want to hear like these arguments like if I were to say hedonism hinders STEM optimization, then there's really no I don't think there shouldn't. So the point of this conversation is so that there's no more nuance between that statement I'm making. Or should I update my statement, which is a tall order because I've been influenced by people like Chavis who really have ingrained that in my head, and for good reason because I infer it's correct. So yeah, if I say like hedonism hinders STEM optimization, you agree. Too much hedonism, maybe I should clarify.
Yes, I just don't agree on the specific cases. Maybe unless we've already come to an agreement on that. Like I don't believe that if you cultivate the jhanas, you're going to be a just like a useless member of society. If anything, like the skills that you develop in that could maybe help you. And it depends really. Like, are you the really you need something, some kind of event? I feel like. I guess maybe this is person to person, but most people that get into that kind of stuff are people that are suffering to some degree or another. In the Buddhist sense of dukkha, it's enough to bother them where they want to get rid of that kind of stuff. And that stuff is probably hindering them from STEM optimization, which I feel like it is in my case. So I feel like it's twofold. Living a meaningful life is about like not being depressed and constantly dissatisfied with your current situations, but also like doing meaningful things that you find meaningful, which in our case is STEM.
Yeah, I mean, I just would add one more thing. I was no different. Like that's the reason I was in QRI early on with not the Discord because it's new, but I was one of those guys who was like whether was suffering. I don't really want to go into details on record, but the point is, my story, I had a 3 hour a day session. So I definitely, I'm confident whether I don't want to pick at this, but I'm confident I had jhana 1 or 2 or something like that. But the point is, like, you see a lot of people in that Discord. Is partly the reason I left. Primarily, the reason I left is because that, like you said, that's kind of all they talk about. It's like they're going in this circle of for lack of a better term, like mental or spiritual masturbation. And then it goes back to my question I love asking since you thought it was funny. It's like, what are you going to build with that? Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And
Well,
they
that's where I feel like we disagree as well. Like
they don't.
having to explicitly build something, if that were your criteria of utility, then so many things would be useless. So I don't feel like it's not a realistic criteria to have. I understand if you don't have a personal interest in it, that's fine. Maybe I'll eventually lose interest in all this stuff and I won't be talking about it anymore. I honestly don't even I don't even think about it that much anymore. I just think of it as it's kind of like working out. Like I do it every day and it makes me feel good. And there's certainly like a progress, right, that you make when you work out, which is analogous. I'm making it analogous to the progress that you would make in meditation towards quote unquote enlightenment or awakening, whatever you want to call it.
Okay,
And I don't see that why that would explicitly hinder me from my STEM pursuits.
okay, it may not hinder you, but whether it be meditating or working out, you'd be lying to yourself if you said there wasn't an objective behind that. Like you're doing it for some objective purpose, or so the question is like, why are you trying to get healthy, for example, or why are you trying to get more, I don't know, amyloid plaques cleared out of your system when you're meditating? I'm not have to cite that in the video, but
Is that actually true?
I don't know. I know it clears, it helps with the glymphatic response, which is just that when you clear out stuff from
Hmm.
like bacteria from your system. But so to sleep, getting a good sleep schedule does that, I think. But
Yeah, I feel like this is all just different aspects of self-improvement, and if you restrict yourself to one dimension, like everyone has to eventually decide what they want to do, and there's no right or wrong answer. But given that we have somewhat of a common utility function, it makes sense to talk about a right or wrong answer to a
so
certain degree.
So I was having a Twitter space about just this, but instead of utility function, we were using the term universal attractors in regards to the stories we tell ourselves or the narratives that we operate on in day-to-day life. And I posed the question that kind of made them stop for a second. I'm like, is there a most fit story? Or in other words, for our context, is there a most fit utility function that all of us could be working towards? Not everyone has to work towards it, but the a good if a good heap of people did X, then the world would be a better place. And the reality is that a good portion of people do not do X. So that's an issue right there. And I think it's worth talking about. I don't know if you agree with me. That could be a starting point, but
Sure, but that most common utility function is not going to look anything like STEM optimization, or at least optimization is a much more specific utility function within that space. Because most people aren't interested in STEM, and you need people that aren't interested in STEM to do non-STEM things. That's the truth. We need people in different roles in society for it to function. Because that's the only way it can function, at least now until AGI takes over.
okay, well, that's a good enough unless you want to continue with another point, that's a good wrap up for me.
Yeah. Well, are you just tired of arguing, or do you feel like we've come to a somewhat of an agreement?
No, I agree with what you just said. I think it, and I've always struggled with that. Like a lot of even the people in my niche who I look up to are like, wow, these are really great scientists. It's like they're surrounded by art a lot of the time in one shape or form. And you have to question, that's just another example of one of the functions in society is art. And you have to question, like, okay, well, what's the utility in that? But really, maybe it's just for the good part of the good life optimizer in some sense, and that's okay. The What I think is that because we're in such, it seems like we're in a really desperate place, even though Kurzweil says all this good stuff is happening or going to happen. It seems like we could get these type of meme viruses that I'm propagating out there and get people to hop on board on the STEM optimizer. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to be like, you know, I'm not trying to be draconian about it, but I'm saying like I definitely would do a better job if I really don't want to speak on my experience right now, but let's just say a lot of the people who are working on their STEM optimizer stuff, they could be doing a lot better job if they had a mindset kind of like me. And then there's me who doesn't have the tools or skills, but I have the mindset. So it's everything's out of order. Up is down. So
Yeah, bro. I'm telling you, mindset plus some Adderall, and you're set.
I was considering Adderall, but because it messes with your sleep, that's the thing that really turns me off from it.
That's why you take instant release, and you'd have to like take it probably earlier in the day. But I'm not a doctor. That's something you can talk to yours about. Um,
Yeah, they told me. No, I didn't. I actually didn't look too much into it, but I know I always get like this pushback from it because my personal experience that I don't want to get into, but
mhm,
yeah, it's
that makes sense. So okay, we can probably close the book on that.
okay. Is that okay, Jen?
Good talk.